welcome back to my channel if you're new here. Hi, my name is Elinor and I'm knitter from Norway, and I absolutely love to knit for babies and toddlers, and I have knit a lot for babies and toddlers. I have knit a lot for my son, and I also have gift knitted quite a lot of knits, both for baby showers and birthdays, and just in general I love to give a little extra attention to all my little baby and kid friends in my family or that my friends have. So I've made quite a lot, and I thought I'd share with you everything that I try to keep in mind when I plan what to gift or what to have in my son's wardrobe. The yarn how I figure out what yarn I'm going to use, how I figure out the patterns, and yeah, just everything I try to think about when planning. And planning baby knits and toddler knits is one of my favorite things when it comes to knitting. Just sitting down with pen and paper and try to figure everything out. So I thought I'd share that, and also of course share my favorite knitting patterns when it comes to babies and toddlers. I've loved to knit for babies for as long as I've been knitting. I think knitting for babies was one of the first thing I did. Of course, I started knitting when I was 4, so at that point, when I was knitting for myself, I was knitting for a toddler. And as I progressed with my knitting, I've always knit either for myself or for babies or toddlers, and that's exactly what I do now. But I really got into baby knits when I was pregnant with my son. For me, it was a really great way to bond with him before he was born, and to prepare for his birth and kind of think about how life would be after the fact. And it was also especially great in the last few months, and especially the last month, where everything just kind of sucks and you can't really do as much as you maybe want to. But with knitting I could feel productive without it being too taxing on my body, and I could also do some things. I was just not sitting around and waiting for something to happen while being uncomfortable. But before I had my son, I did not really know what would be practical or good when it came to knitting for babies. Of course, I had my mom and grandma telling me, and I would ask them when knitting for others, but nothing quite teaches you like living it. So I learned quite a lot that first year with my son on what patterns I think are practical and good to use, and the patterns I figured out that I loved his first year is still the patterns I knit for him now, and it's the patterns I always go back to. I got a few favorites, and those are really near and dear to my heart. And of course I figured out what yarns are practical to use and what I like to think about when it comes to yarn. So I thought I'd just try to explain my whole thought process when it comes to how I plan out baby knits and toddler knits, because it's honestly the best thing in the world, I think, to just sit there, pen and paper, figure everything out. And I thought I'd start with explaining how I choose yarn. And of course I live in Norway, and I live in a pretty cold area in Norway as well, so I am very partial to wool. You always need something to stay warm here, so I gravitate towards wool. I almost always use wool when I knit for babies. But even if you live in a warmer place, in a warmer climate, wool might be a really good thing to have in the wardrobe, because wool has some really cool qualities, and I have written them down here just to remember them. The first one is that wool is hypoallergenic, which is really nice when it comes to babies, because babies' skin and everything can just be a bit sensitive because they're fresh. They haven't really gotten used to the world, so something hypoallergenic can be really nice against their skin. Of course I wouldn't knit with something like Petiteknit for a brand new baby, but there are a lot of softer wools. But wool is hypoallergenic, And one of the really nice things when it comes to knitting for babies and kids with wool is that wool is elastic. It has a lot of elasticity in it. And for me, when I've been knitting gifts, and especially for my son where I've seen him grow and use them, that has meant that he has been able to use all of his knitted pieces for much longer than he has been able to use store-bought clothes, like store-bought clothes in cotton. He's grown out of at a much quicker rate than his knitted pieces, and he still has some. He's almost 3 years old now, and he still has some knitted pieces that fit him that are in the size 18 months. So he has been able to wear them for more than 18 months now. So that's been a really nice thing with knitting, that it is elastic enough that it will fit for a really long time. Another really nice thing about wool, and that the local health care system for babies here, Helsestasjon, recommended for us. They recommended that we use a lot of wool, even though my son is born in the middle of summer. Is that wool is really breathable, and because wool is so breathable, it's a great way to regulate temperature for babies, because babies can't really regulate their own temperatures. So since wool is quite warm, but it's also very breathable, that makes it a really great way to regulate temperatures. I of course wouldn't recommend knitting with something really bulky, because that will just be warm. But if you go for a really thin wool, it can be a great way to regulate the baby's temperature. And another great thing about wool has a lot of fun things about it. It's so fun to research how many cool things and cool qualities wool has. But wool also is a natural protection against UV. I think it's a protection to UV up to 30 UV, which is also really cool. And that is a lot higher than, for example, cotton and other more plant-based fibers. They don't protect against UV up to such high UV, but wool does. And those are just some of the cool and really great properties of wool. And of course, if you choose wool that is superwash, you might lose some of these qualities. Wool also is self-cleansing, not of course if you get a big spill on your sweater, but if your sweater just starts to smell like sweat, for example. Babies don't sweat, but for adults, if you just hang your sweater out to air, the wool is self-cleansing. But if you have superwash wool, it loses that quality, because all of the wool fibers are coated in plastic, and that also means microplastic and everything. So superwash definitely takes away some of the qualities that natural wool have. But superwash wool is still really great, and it still has some of the qualities that regular wool has. And of course, superwash wool is great when you have babies, because it is a lot easier to wash. If you have any diaper accidents or spit up or just all of the regular baby messes, superwash might be a really good choice. And I can honestly say that I choose to work with a lot of superwash when it comes to babies, because parents usually watch over their babies a lot, so you don't need that much of UV protection or it being breathable, because you will check if your baby is warm or cold, or you won't leave your baby out for that long. But I think wool is still really great if it's natural, or if it's superwash. You lose some and you get some with the superwash. But I have to say that me personally, I wash all of my wool, whether it's superwash or not, in the washing machine, and I've never had any problems with that. So if you really want to use natural wool, because of all of the qualities that natural wool has, I would say just maybe try to wash a swatch in your washing machine first to see what happens. But I always wash all of my wool and all of my knits in the washing machine, and I've never had a problem with that. So I definitely would recommend wool if you're knitting for a baby. And there are a lot of different types of wool, but I think for the smallest babies, I would say I'd definitely recommend using merino wool because that is the softest type of wool, and I'd also recommend knitting with as thin as a wool as possible. Of course, that might take a bit longer, and you definitely have to have a lot of patience but I think thinner wool is a lot better for babies because thin yarns and layers are a lot easier for babies because they can't regulate their temperature, but you can take one layer off or you can put one layer on, whereas with thick yarn it's really hard to layer it. So I definitely recommend a wool that's thin enough so you'll be able to knit and kind of use it in layers with other clothes than it's of course as well, but I always try to think about it being layerable. And for older babies or toddlers, they might let you know maybe very loudly if a yarn is itchy or if they don't want it. Same goes for patterns. So when they start to get a mind of their own, it might be a good idea to kind of play it by ear. For my son, who is almost 3, I am able to knit for him with any type of yarn. He just loves knits. He doesn't find anything itchy. He likes everything from superwash merino wool to cardigan. So he's not really a itchy person, and I don't know if that's because he's been wearing a lot of wool since he was a baby or if he's just not that itchy. But if you're knitting for a toddler or a baby that can let their mind be known, I would definitely ask them what they're okay with, or maybe make them feel the yarn so you can see if it's scratchy to them or not. Same with patterns, try to find the pattern they're into because knitting is a lot of work. So once they start to make a mind of their own, it's better to kind of team up with the kid than to force them into something because then they won't wear it. And if you live in colder climates, I also really recommend having a couple of pieces with alpaca wool because wool is warm, but alpaca is a type of wool that's 3 times warmer than regular sheep's wool, and it's also an incredibly soft yarn, and alpaca is also hypoallergenic. And it also has a lot of those other qualities that wool has. So alpaca is also really great. It just is a bit warmer, so I don't think I'd recommend it if you live in a really warm climate. But if you live in a colder climate, I definitely recommend it. I've used a lot of alpaca for gift knits and for my son ever since he was a baby. And I know some worry about alpaca yarn shedding and the fluff from the yarn getting in the baby's face or mouth, nose, eyes, and that has never been a problem for me, and it's never been a problem for any of the people I've gifted things knit with alpaca with either. And I have premature cousins now, and I knit them blankets using alpaca wool, and those are their parents' favorite blankets, and they've used it ever since they were born. So for me, alpaca wool has never been a problem, but I always recommend washing everything you knit before starting to use it, especially for small babies and toddlers, because there can be a lot of residual dye in it that can be a bit irritating. You get a lot of the loose fluff, loose hairs from the yarn away when you wash it, and just everything is a bit better after washing. So definitely recommend always washing it before your child starts wearing it or before giving it away. But those are my yarn recommendations. Of course, there are many options, and I didn't really go into details about brands because there are so many different price points and different things different people can afford. But those are the yarn types I really like to use when it comes to babies because it is hypoallergenic, elastic, breathable. I just like a lot of the qualities, and of course I'm very colored because of the fact that I live in Norway and it's cold here, but there are a lot of options when it comes to knitting, and there are probably a lot of ways to figure out other yarns to work with if you want to do that. But I think we can move into pattern recommendations and what I think about when it comes to patterns. So usually at this point I'll have figured out yarn, I'll have thought about, okay, this is a baby, for example, say it's a baby shower gift, this is a baby, it's going to be born that time of year, because you also have to try to figure out what kind of sizes am I going to do in the different kinds of yarns. If you're doing some like fingering weight yarn and some DK weight yarn, it might be a good idea for the DK weight yarn pieces to fit when it's winter. But it's a bit hard to figure out how fast babies will grow and everything, so sizing is hard to figure out, but most baby patterns has their sizes divided up in months, and those are usually pretty spot on, at least in my opinion and in my experience. So I try to figure out that, try to figure out the yarn, the colors, and how much I have of each yarn. And when I have done that and I've kind of tried to figure out a base of colors that I want to work with, I dive into my pattern library, and I have all of my patterns divided up in like baby clothing and toddler clothing and different categories in that as well. And a lot of my favorite patterns come in sizes all the way from newborn to toddler, and oftentimes all the way up into adult, because a lot of my favorite patterns are from Petiteknit, and she makes her patterns from like 0 to 99 years of age. So that's something really great, because I love to make knits so that either siblings I'm making knitting for can match, or parent-child. I love all of that, so I love Petiteknit because I can make a lot of matching clothes. But I've tried to divide my pattern recommendations into 2 different categories. So my favorite for babies and my favorite for toddlers. A lot of them are the same, but maybe for different reasons. But I'll start with my favorite patterns for babies, and my absolute favorite for babies, and this is like a category, is suits. I think suits for babies are so practical. It's not that hard to put on because babies don't necessarily want to lay still, so you can just put it on. It's one piece, quite easy, and it's kind of like pajamas just in wool. And I know that I thought pajamas were a quite easy choice of outfit when I had a baby, and wool suit is just the same but easier to be outdoors. And I have some favorite suits that I always come back to, and my favorite suits that's like the closest to a pajama is the Monday suit, and that's like a thin wool suit. It's knit with fingering weight yarn, and it's by Petiteknit, and that's the suit with the curving button band. And I think all of the like tiny details make it super elegant, super cute. It's very basic, so it goes with everything. And yeah, the curving of the button band is just super cute when it comes to small babies. And what I do when I knit this suit is I always double the space between the buttons, because I, as a parent, did not want to do up a million buttons every time I would do a diaper change or anything would happen, and I don't think anyone else really wants to either. So when I make suits that my son has used or I gift knit, I always double the distance, because then it will still make sense within the pattern. And I figured out that you can get away with not too much gaping even though you double the distance, and you get a lot fewer buttons, of course. But that is a big favorite of mine when it comes to baby knits, and you also get away with not using too much yarn, at least in the smaller sizes. I don't think this pattern goes up that high. I think this pattern maybe stops at 1 year, like 9 to 12 months, maybe 12 to 18 months. But this definitely is not the fingering weight suit Petiteknit has that goes the highest up in suits. She has 2 other suits that I think the sizes go all the way up to 2 to 3 years. But the Bonnet suit is definitely my favorite for babies. And then, like, my biggest favorite when it comes to baby knits, but also maybe the project that I like the least to knit, is the Selma Sleepsuit. It is such a practical knit, especially here in Norway, where almost all babies sleep outside in their prams every day. They take their naps outside, so having a sleepsuit is kinda a need. So I love this. It's the perfect pattern. It has a hood that's not too snug, it's just the perfect amount of snug. It's foldable over the arms and feet, so it's great for sleeping, but you don't have to change immediately once the baby wakes up, because you can just fold the cuff over and their fingers and feet will be free again. So that's a really, really, really great suit for babies. I think it almost is a must-have for everyone that likes to have their children sleeping outside in the pram or taking a lot of longer walks outside, if you don't live in a really warm place, that is. But the Selma Sleepsuit is definitely a great knit, and I almost wish it wasn't such a perfect knit, because it really is not my favorite to knit up, because I just don't love knitting up garter stitch. But because it is garter stitch, that makes it a really beginner friendly pattern, because you just knit back and forth, do increases, and then for the sleeves you also knit back and forth, and then you sew the sleeves together. I don't like sewing the sleeves together, so what I usually do is I knit the sleeves in the round, and then I just alternate knitting 1 row stockinette knit stitches and then 1 row purl stitches, and that gives the same look, just without having to sew the sleeves shut at the end. So you have some abilities to do different things, but the Selma Sleepsuit is definitely a really beginner friendly pattern, and I think it's the best pattern there is for babies out there, at least the best pattern I've seen. Another great suit that I love, and it's kind of close to the Selma Sleepsuit, is the baby bear suit. This one is by Knitting for Olive, and I don't think the pattern is quite as good as Petiteknit's ones. I had to scratch my head sometimes when knitting it up, just because things are written a bit weird and you kind of have to try to understand a bit harder. It isn't that easy to understand immediately, but it is such a cute suit. This is the same. It has a hoodie, but the hoodie has little bear ears. It's the baby bear suit, if I didn't say, the baby bear suit by Knitting for Olive. The hood with the bear ears, and it's a lot more tight fitting than the Selma Sleepsuit, so it's better for moving around, because the Selma Sleepsuit is so baggy and comfortable and like a sleeping bag for sleeping, that it's not really a great suit to be out and about and moving in when the baby is older and starting to crawl and like move around. I don't think it's great for moving around, just for sleeping, but the baby bear suit is a lot better for that. It's more tight fitting, and the baby bear suit also, it doesn't have cuffs for the sleeves, but it for the smallest sizes, I think all the sizes up to a year, you can knit the suit with kind of a sock at the end. so the feet are in the suit, and I think that's really nice because then you're able to like, it's so tight fitting that you're able to put like a shoe of some sort outside of it to keep the baby warm or not wet or something when being outside and they're moving around. But yeah, it's still like a sock, so you don't have to do a whole other sock. So the baby bear suit is also a pattern I really love, and I do keep knitting it, and every time I knit it I understand the pattern a little bit better. I wish that Knitting for Olive had a bit better patterns because I love their pieces, but I don't like the way they write their patterns. But I think I just really enjoy the way Petiteknit writes her patterns, so everything else is not my favorite. But the baby bear suit is definitely a really great suit. And then for things that are not suits, for the days where you don't want to wear suits, I have some other favorites, and one big favorite of mine that I love to make is the Olives wrap. It is this wrap cardigan, so you knit it bottom up and then put the sleeves in and everything, but you have this one clef that goes over here and then another over, so in the front you have double the material, and this is also fingering weight. Almost all of the patterns are fingering weight. The Selma Sleepsuit and the baby bear suit are not, those are DK weight, but most of my favorites for baby knits are fingering weight because that's just better. But the Olives wrap, it closes, the fabric lays double here, and then you do I-cord for the closing, so you tie a little bow both up at the neck and at the armpit, and that's also that's a great cardigan. I really enjoy cardigans for babies, so you don't have to pull anything over their head, and I think the Olive wrap is really cute, which of course helps both when you're knitting it up and when you're dressing your baby or you're gifting something. You kind of want it to look cute, and the Olive wrap definitely looks cute. I didn't make it for my son when he was a tiny baby because I didn't know about the pattern before it was too late, but I made him one in the size 6 months and in the size 12 months, and he used those loads. The one in the 12 months I think he used the most because that just lasted him a lot longer, but I think it comes all the way up to 24 months. So you could definitely knit it for a baby and a toddler, and it looks really cute on both. And I also knitted for my twin cousins. I think I knitted for them in the size 3 months. So that's really nice. And Knitting for Olive also has a tight that's called the Olives Thights, and I think that tights goes really well with the Olives wrap. They are really similar, they're both in stockinette, they have kind of the same fit. So usually when I do the Olives wrap I do a matching tights, and for the Olives tights the pattern is for a tights with like the feet and everything, but I found after knitting it a lot of times both with the feet and without that I like the tights with the feet for the smallest size, the 1 to 3 months size. Then I think the feet are really great, but for the 6 month size and the 9 to 12 month size, those are the 3 sizes the pattern comes in, I enjoy it much better without the feet, because usually about 6 months, that's when babies start to be more mobile, maybe they start to move, try to crawl, definitely at 9 to 12 months, and I noticed that the sock part of the tights really got in the way of my son trying to crawl. So the tights I had in the 9 to 12 month size that I knit before I had discovered that, we almost didn't use because it just wasn't practical at that age to have tights with a foot on it. So now every time I do the tights, I do the tights with the foot for the smallest size, and then I do it without for the 2 next sizes, because I just noticed that you get a lot more use out of it then. And what I usually do is that I will knit the feet a bit longer, so I will knit the feet all the way until the pattern says to start working on the like foot part of the tights, and then I'll do ribbing instead, so I can fold up the ribbing. And that means that for the first few months you can wear it with the ribbing folded up, and when the baby gets longer you can fold the ribbing down and the knitting will be able to fit for longer. And I really enjoy trying to figure out those like tips and tricks to make the knitting last longer, because it takes quite a few hours to knit up just one piece of knitting, so I always try to make it last for as long as possible, both when I'm knitting for myself and others. But the olives wrap with the olives tights is definitely a good combo. I have knit them both with superwash yarn and without, and they're great. I have, as I said, my son had them in all sizes. Unfortunately he didn't use the last size a lot, but I know he would have if it only didn't have the foot. So that's my recommendation when it comes to that, to maybe not knit the foot for the last 2 sizes. Some other patterns we used a lot was the Little Sister's Romper by Petiteknit and the Elinor's Bloomer and the Little Sister's Romper. Those were some of the first knits I made him when I was pregnant, and he also went home from the hospital in one of his Little Sister's Rompers. I think it was a grey one. We used that a lot because the Little Sister Rompers just come in such tiny sizes, and rompers are also quite tiny to begin with, so they just go the knit up really fast. So I was kind of obsessed with the rompers and I made a lot of rompers. I found that we didn't use that many rompers after he turned like 4 to 6 months, so I stopped knitting rompers after that. But I think we had 1 romper for every month up until that point, and we used those a lot. Rompers are great because they like cover the main part of the body where all the internal organs are, and that's like the place you want to stay warm the most. So even he was born in the summer, so it wasn't that cold, but I just always wanted him to definitely stay warm here, so we used those a lot. And it's really easy to make it a whole outfit because I could just slip on a pair of bloomers and it was an outfit with the Little Sister's Romper and the bloomers. I knit a lot of the Elinor's bloomers because those are just really simple, and I like knitting to be quite simple for babies, because if you do a lot of lace or color work, it's really easy for their little fingers to get stuck in it, and I don't like that when you're trying to pull the clothes on. I just wanted to slip on without having to make sure that their fingers doesn't snag on some of the color work strands on the inside or in some lace when you're putting it on. So I just like regular stockinette or maybe ribbing when it comes to baby clothes. Just keep it simple. So that's something else we used a lot, but the rompers and the bloomers were definitely mostly for when he was a really tiny baby, so up to 6 months. Another thing we used a lot, and another that's a big favorite of mine, is the Willums overalls. The Willums overalls I think we also had in every size, and one of the last things I cast on before I gave birth to my son was Willums overalls. I think in his first year we might have had 2 pairs of Willums overalls in every size, because I would knit one pair in DK weight and then one pair in fingering weight, and the Willums overalls worked with both fingering weight and DK weight, and the size stayed about the same, not 100% fingering weight. It was of course a bit smaller, but I love Willums overalls. That's again a pattern by Petiteknit. I think if I don't specify otherwise, the pattern is by Petiteknit. And yeah, the Willums overalls is also a pattern that goes up quite high in age, I think to maybe 4 years. And it's great. It's great for baby. It's really simple to slip on, and then you just button up 2 buttons in the front. It's also quite easy to row with them. What I usually do is I knit the ribbing, and then I don't count the ribbing as part of the foot's length, because then you can fold the ribbing up and the pants will fit for longer. But if you count for the foot length all the way from the bottom of the ribbing, of course they won't last as long. So I just like to do extra ribbing to get extra length on a lot of. But of course, if you decide to do that with the ribbing where you don't count that and you knit the feet longer, it might be a good idea to also make sure to knit a couple extra centimeters in the sides, just to make sure that everything fits the same at the same time. And when you're able to use it longer because of the feet, you're also able to use it longer because of the length. Another great thing with the Willums is that it actually is such a high overall. It goes all the way up to here, so it again covers all of those important intestinal organs and keeps everything in the middle warm, which is really great for babies again. So that's something we really love. And the next on my list might be my favorite pattern ever, and that is the Friday sweater. The Friday sweater is really special to me because that's the first like pattern I can really remember knitting up for my son. It's the first sweater he put on when we got back home, and the Friday sweater, the first Friday sweater he owned, and the first pair of Willums overalls that he owned, those were matching, and he wore those all the time. A good thing with the Willums is that you don't really need a sweater because it covers so much, but I really liked to make the Willums and the Friday sweater matching, and the first pair I think were in Droppsbaby in North Sea. The Willums and the Friday sweater were not North Sea and orange, and the Willums had these orange buttons, and that set together was so cute, and I used it every opportunity I had, and I was honestly so sad when it didn't fit anymore. But I have so many fun memories with the Friday sweater and the Willums overall, so those patterns are really special to me, and I've made sure to have those in every single size ever since. And another great thing with the Friday sweater is that it goes all the way from baby to adult. Well, the adult is the sweater, but it's a tee, but you can easily make it into sweater. So that's also great because you can make matching sweaters, which I've also done with the Friday sweater, which again makes it more special. So the Friday sweater is just a really special pattern to me. It's also really fun because broken rib might be my favorite knitted structure ever. It's so fun. There's always something happening, but you also get breaks with this roseberry do only stockinette. Another great thing is that there's stripes, so there's really easy to see your progress, which is really nice when you're knitting on 3mm needles. And it's like color work without these floats on the inside, so the baby can't really catch their hands on any of the floats. So that is just really nice, and I love the Friday sweater. I've made it so many times. It's an absolute obsession of mine, and yeah, it's just really cute. If you're not super comfortable with pulling sweaters over the head of your baby because they can't really support the head. You're afraid of like the soft spot, everything. I think I'd recommend waiting until like 4 to 6 months, because then their head control is a lot better. You're more used to having a baby, handling a baby, everything, and just more comfortable in general. So if you're not that comfortable to begin with, I think I'd maybe wait and do jackets up until that point. But the Friday sweater is definitely a big recommendation from me. And I have 2 more recommendations when it comes to like garments and clothes before moving on to accessories. I hope this makes sense and I'm able to explain why I love these patterns. It's kind of hard to explain why I love them, because I just know that I do love them and that I like working them up and that they are really good to wear. But I hope I do them justice. But the last 2 is the Anker sweater and the Anker jacket by Petiteknit. Just really her whole Anker series, but the Anker sweater and the Anker jacket are really great. I would say probably for babies that I would recommend the jacket more, again just because you won't have to pull it over the head. And another really great thing with jackets is that it is really great when it comes to layering, like I talked about. You're able to open it, you're able to button it, you're able to just partially unbutton it, you're able to take it off, you're able to put it on. You have a lot more variation with jackets than sweaters, because a sweater is either on or is off, but with jackets you have a lot of different ways to wear it to make it hotter or colder, or just a lot more ways to manage the temperature. So I really recommend jackets. The Anker sweater and the jacket are also really similar. It's just that the jacket is a jacket. And they are both knit in DK weight yarn, so I would maybe recommend having them in winter if you live in a warmer climate, or just they're better for colder weather because they are DK. I know here we got use of them year round because we live in a place where pretty much the whole year you have use for DK weight yarn, because it's just never that warm here. And babies again need help regulating their temperature, but those are a big tip for mine. I really loved the Anker jacket we have. Unfortunately, I only got to make my son one when he was a baby because I had so many other plans all the time, so I didn't get around to making more than one. But the one that I did make, we really loved that one. He had that one when he was more of like an older baby, but we definitely got a lot of use out of it. I think we had it in late summer and early fall. I think that's when it fit him, and that was a really, really, really great jacket. And we've had the Anker sweaters in every single size. I absolutely love the Anker sweaters, but I think I would recommend the jacket over the sweater, even though I made more of the sweaters, just because a jacket is easier to put on and it's easier to layer. But those are all of like the main pieces of clothing, and then I have a couple of accessories. And of course I have to mention the baby bear bonnet. I love the baby bear bonnet. I've made so many. It's definitely a go-to when knitting for my son and when knitting gift knits. It is really, this is from Knitting for Olive. It is super cute. Again, it has these little bear ears. It's a great project because it is knit with fingering and kid silk, so you can really stash bust, because in the smaller sizes, and honestly all the sizes, you need so very little of each. And that was my introduction to the baby bear bonnet, because I just had a tiny bit of mohair and a tiny bit of fingering with yarn that I wanted to get out of my stash after I had made my April cardigan, I think. So I figured that it would be the perfect amount for the baby bear bonnet. So I tried it out and I absolutely fell in love with the baby bear bonnet, and ever since I've been making so many. And another great thing with the baby bear bonnet is that it's really easy to make changes. For example, if you're not comfortable with using mohair for your very small baby or for gifting to a baby, very small baby, you can easily just knit with 2 strands of fingering or 1 strand of DK, or you can swap the mohair with some other sort of lace yarn like Alpaca følgetråd, which is not as like hairy, so it's very easy to change it up like that. I've done that with a lot of the baby bear bonnets I've made. I've made a couple in double Sunday, I've made a couple in Drops Merino extra fine, I've made a couple using other strands of lace, so it's just really a fun project. And another thing that's really fun with it is that every time my son has wear it when we've been to the grocery store or any store, from when he was born and up until now, he always gets compliments on it and how cute it is, and he's a little bear and everyone just loves it, and it makes everyone around so happy to see a little knitted bear hat. So that's another really great thing about it. It is also the only bonnet I've ever made that actually fit my son's head. I made a lot of bonnets before he was born because I thought they looked really cute, the Anker's bonnet and all of those like that, and I've tried later as well to make bonnets when I've seen cute ones, but they never fit. Either they won't cover enough of the forehead, or they won't cover enough of the neck, or they just won't cover the ears properly, and they just won't fit properly. But the baby bear bonnet, it sits perfect. It covers the forehead and the neck and the ears. It ties very comfortably. It sits very comfortably. I just love the fit of it. I love the look of it. I love to work it up. It is really great, and I think the biggest size is 24 months, but my son is almost 3 and he still uses his 18-month size. So you can really wear it for a long time, and my son does not have a small head either, so if you just make sure to knit a bit loosely, and definitely if you use DK weight, you can make it last really long. And I think if you use DK weight, you can also get away with knitting on 4mm needles instead of the pattern's recommended 3.5, and then you can make it last even longer and even bigger sizes. So the baby bear bonnet is definitely a great one, and a big recommendation if you're ever knitting for a baby or a young toddler. And then something else that has really become a go-to when it comes to knitting for babies for me is the Sunday Socks Junior. I had not figured out this modification before my son was too old for it, but I think I started doing it about 1.5 years ago. And what I do is I knit the Sunday Socks Junior by Petiteknit. I knit them following the pattern exactly for the smallest size, except between you do the decreases after the heel and after those decreases, but before the toe decreases I make sure that I only knit 10 rows, because I've looked at some other patterns the first time I did this and looked at their measurements for the size about 0 to 6 months, and I figured out that to get that measurement, what I needed to do was to knit those 10 rows between each of those decreases, and I've done that. I can't count how many pairs I've made now. I think I've made close to 10 pairs doing it that way now, and given it in different baby shower gifts that I've made. And as I said, I've never been able to actually try it out myself, but I have seen that the people I've given it to has gotten loads of use out of them, and I've talked to my friend that's also a knitter that I gave them to when she had a baby, and she loved them. And what was really great with them was that the Sandnes Junior have quite a long shaft, so you can either fold it down or you can fold it up, and both of those options make it so that it's harder to kick off, because babies are kind of notorious as to kicking their socks off and just losing their socks everywhere. But because when you fold out the shaft it goes all the way up to their knee almost, it's really hard to kick off, or when you fold it down it makes it even tighter around the ankle, which also makes it harder to kick off. So the Sandnes Junior with that modification for babies is also great. I think also the smallest size in the pattern might also fit for baby when they're a bit older, but definitely for like the 0 to 6 month size I like to do it that way. And they're also great because they're DK weight socks on 4mm, and for such small babies that is almost like a slipper, so it's just a really comfortable pair of socks for so small babies. But that are some of my favorite patterns and pattern recommendations for babies. I hope you found some you like, and before doing this video I actually asked my fiance what he really liked when we had the baby, and also for toddlers, but that's coming up later. But I asked him his favorite, what he has really appreciated in having a full knitted wardrobe, because I knit a lot for my son, so he had quite a lot to choose from. But I asked him like, what have you always reached for, what have you really appreciated, and I didn't give him options. He just listed a couple of the patterns he's enjoyed the most. We talk a lot about knitting at home, I'm obsessed with knitting, so he has learned his favorites by name. And one he really loves is the Selma Sleepsuit. He said that that's his absolute favorite. It's the best thing to ever happen to knitted baby clothes. So the Selma Sleepsuits get a big approval from him. Another thing he wanted to give his approval to was the Willums overalls. He loves those as well and had only good things to say about them. And I think those were his main ones. And he also really loved the suits, both Monday suits and Petiteknit's other suits. He loves all of those, and he's on all of those are pieces that we've had from my son was newborn up until now. He still has all of those pieces in his wardrobe, and I think I'm just saying that so to show you that it's not only me as a knitter that's recommending them because they're fun to knit and because I like knitting them. My fiance that's not a knitter, and that's only a parent trying to dress his son in the best clothing. He also really loves those pieces. He likes the other one as well, but those are the one that really like sets themselves apart from the other ones that he really loves. He also loves the baby bonnet. He picks that out a lot when dressing our son. But those are the favorites for babies. And then I have some favorites for toddlers. This is my favorites for my toddlers. I don't have that many toddlers in my life that I gift knit for. I have a couple, and then these are usually what I go for. So at the top I have the Zipper Sweater Junior. This is also when I asked my fiance, the first thing he answered when I asked him what he has liked in our toddler's wardrobe, he immediately said Zipper Sweater. So the Zipper Sweater Junior, that's great. I think it's partly because both me and my fiance has a zipper sweater, so we can all match. But the zipper sweater is really great. I love it. I love that it has like a quarter zip, so it becomes a bit more breathable. We only have the Zipper Sweater Junior right now for my son, but I really want to do the Zipper Sweater Light as well. I think that is also a really great knit for a toddler. Again, that might be because of where we live, because we get a lot of use out of the Zipper Sweater even in the middle of summer. So it is quite cold here, but the Zipper Sweater is a really great knit, and my son also loves his Zipper Sweater. What's great with these Toddler knits is that I also know that my son loves them. Again on this list is the Willums overalls. I've already talked about them and I love them for about the same reason. They're also really great to move around in, and I really appreciate that there are a pair of pants that go up to that big of a size, because a lot of pants stop at around the 2-year size. I don't know if that's because a lot of people don't have the patience to knit pants after the 2-year size or why, but I'm so happy that the Willums overalls go up to 4-year-old in size. I love them, and they are tight fitting enough that they're really easy to move around in, and they don't are so baggy that they get stuck on everything else. So we love those. And all of these at the top are the first things that came to mind when I asked my fiance. He also said the Anker suit we have, so like the Monday suit, but the Anker suit, because the Anker suit goes further up in size. That's the one we have currently. I think my son's wearing the one in the 18-month size because I haven't had the patience to. I had to go put my son to bed, and now the lighting is quite different. I hope that's okay, but I think we were talking about the Anker suit size, and he's wearing the 18-month size because I just knew the last time I was making it that I am probably never going to have the patience to do this again. So I decided to do the sleeves longer, the legs longer, the body longer, just everything I could make longer, I made longer. Not by much, maybe by a couple of centimeters everywhere. And that has lasted him until now. It still fits him very well. It's not snug or anything. And that's the really fun part, and that just proves my point with wool being really elastic, because it fit him really well when he was 18 months too, and that's almost 18 months since. He did not swim in it. We didn't have to really fold up the sleeves. It fit him about as good as it does now. Of course it was a bit looser and everything was a bit longer, but it fit him pretty much the same, and it still fits him really good. Nothing is too short. The sleeves still are long enough, the feet still are long enough, the body is still long enough. I think we honestly might be able to wear it next winter with him as well. And it's not that he stopped growing, because he has been growing out of his both clothes like crazy. I cannot keep up with his both clothes because I just see his knitting clothes fit so perfectly for so long, so I kind of forget that we have to keep refreshing his both wardrobe or his non-knitted wardrobe. So it's not just that he stopped growing, it just his knits really grow with him, and especially now that he's older, they really grow with him. When he was a baby, he grew so fast, so even though they grew with him, he couldn't have them for longer than maybe 3 months. But of course the growth isn't as rapid after the first year, so now he can wear his knits for much longer, and that gives me a lot more motivation to knit them as well, because I know we can cherish them for much longer and love them and wear them and really get a lot of wear out of them. So it is much more worth it, it feels like, to put in all of those knitting hours. Of course there are more knitting hours now than there were when I had to knit like 3 to 6 months clothing, but I really love that we really get to love his clothes now and wear them for so long. But those 3 are my fiance's favorite. He said that he really liked this one because we've been skiing a lot this winter, and this suit has been the perfect suit to have under his ski clothing, because his big winter suit is a bit too big when going skiing. It really affects his mobility, so we have used a bit thinner outside clothing for his ski clothing, and then it's been great to be able to put in an extra layer of wool there. As you maybe can hear through this video, I love layers. I think layers are great. They are, so I really recommend doing lots of layers. But those are the 3 favorites, and then I have a couple of favorites. My favorites are usually just everything we have matching. So his Marius sweater, that the whole family sweater has Marius sweaters, so I love that. His zipper sweater, as I've said, and his Melange sweater that matches with the Melange sweater I have. And then he has a novice cardigan chunky edition, and I also have one of those, so I love that one. I love his Ingrid sweater, that is a really beautiful sweater. I also know that he loves it, that makes me love it a bit more. That's the great thing about Toddlers. It's really fun to knit for them because they have opinions, so you can ask them like, do you like this? And then if they do, it makes the finished piece so much more special. That's something I really like about his Ingrid. That's something I also really like about the teddy bear pattern, the teddy bear sweater pattern that Petiteknit has, where it's a super basic stockinette sweater, but you embroider a teddy bear on the front, and that makes it a lot more special, and toddlers love it. If I am recommending, if any of my mother's friends or my mother or anyone asks me what to knit for a toddler in their life, that's my go-to answer, because it's such a basic, anyone can knit that sweater, and then you just embroider a teddy bear face or something else the kid loves, because it's a basic sweater, just stockinette. You can put whatever you want there, and the likelihood of the kid liking the sweater is so high, because you can embroider something they like on it, and then they'll kind of automatically love it. So that's another great sweater. And then of course the Selma Sleepsuit, because my son still naps. It's great if you're ever going to go camping or just being outside sleeping, and my son still does that, so we still love the Selma Sleepsuit. He has one in size 2 to 3 years. And of course we have some accessories we love as well. I love the baby bear bonnet still. It's great, it's super cute. Why wouldn't I love it? And the only big difference, and I love Sunday socks, the junior version. The only difference between babies and toddlers really when it comes to the accessories and it is that I also do hipster hats, because my son really loves to be able to dress himself, and with the baby bear bonnet you have to be able to tie a bow, and he can't really do that yet, but the hipster hat you just pull on and he can do that. So he gets his hipster hat himself, so he puts it on himself, and he just loves being able to dress himself. So for that I really love the hipster hat, and I feel like a lot of the other clothes also are really easy to be able to put on yourself. So that's something I definitely look for when I knit for toddlers, that they can be able to use it themselves and put it on themselves. But those were all of my favorite patterns, some of the things I try to think about when I knit for babies and toddlers, and just me rambling on about everything that goes on in my head when I'm knitting for babies and toddlers. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like and a comment, and if you want to see more from me, please subscribe and remember to ring that bell button. Bye!